Today, we're going to create clarity out of the confusion that is intermittent fasting for women. I know that there's a lot of people saying different things, and we're going to get into what the truth is around intermittent fasting, one of the best strategies for intermittent fasting if you are a woman. I'm here with my amazing wife, Erica Jones. She's helped me run my health practices. She has her master's in health science and is somebody that is prolific in respect to reading and researching on a ton of different longevity topics, including this topic of intermittent fasting. So thank you for joining me here, and I'm excited to dig into this.
Yeah, I am too, and I think this is going to be a great topic for women who are always looking to up-level with their health and well-being, especially as you age. You know, that's me. We're living this lifestyle, and I always want to stay on the cutting edge. And so we've been a fasting couple for many years, and I was really surprised when I saw two conflicting experts, if you will, saying different advice on this subject. I'll get into that in a minute. But before we talk about that, I want you to share some of the benefits of fasting, why you think it's so helpful for wellness and longevity, and then we'll talk about how it applies to women and some of the things that we need to watch out for.
Yeah, and there's nuance to it, right? There's different things that we'll get into in this video that will allow for you to understand if it's for you or if it's not for you. But one of the biggest benefits is that it helps you get into fat burning state. It helps you actually get ripped. It helps you create beta oxidation, which is turning fat into energy. It helps to also create metabolic flexibility. A lot of people don't have metabolic flexibility. That's the ability to move from sugar burning into fat burning state. And what we found in the different devices that you can actually test metabolic flexibility every day with our patients. You know, we've worked with thousands of patients over the years, and as well as the lab tests that we can take, is that intermittent fasting helps accelerate metabolic flexibility. So this is good for insulin sensitivity. It's good for people that are looking to balance their hormones and optimize their overall health and vitality. Intermittent fasting also helps people overcome various cravings. So I think a lot of people, they get used to eating sugar, eating carbohydrates, but then when you fast, it kind of breaks up the craving. It puts you in charge. Yeah. I think from a mental perspective and a psychological perspective, it's really healthy for people. And then you can ultimately get to a place where you're not just eating because your hormones are telling you you want sugar, but you're eating because you're eating to fuel your body, and you're essentially getting to a place where hormonally, when you eat, you start getting hungry, and it's much healthier in that respect. Another thing I love about intermittent fasting is when you fast, it increases brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF1 in the brain. It's kind of like miracle grow for the brain. So there's a lot of really amazing things that it can do from a neurological perspective. And the other thing is, if you're fasting, you're reverse intermittent fasting, where you're eating in the morning and then you stop eating, in the early afternoon or mid-afternoon, and you fast at night. Some people are getting way better sleeps at night. Some people, they get better deep sleep, and they feel way more rejuvenated at night, because normally they're eating a big meal before they go to bed, and then they intermittent fast and they'll have their last meal at like 3 o'clock. And when you hormonally regulate, when you're starting to utilize this on a regular basis, this tool of fasting, then people are getting much deeper sleeps. You can track it on your Oura Ring or your Whoop Band or your Apple Watch, and you can see them getting deeper delta wave sleep.
That's huge. And I also know that you are the longevity expert. Talk to us a little bit about how fasting can help with aging, maybe clearing out some of those senescent cells and things like that. How does it benefit?
Well, it stimulates a process called autophagy. And so, it depends on the person's physiology and how metabolically flexible they are. Like, you and I can go into a fasted ketogenic state fast, right? Like, we could eat ice cream at lunch and then be in ketosis by dinner, kind of thing. I don't know if that's accurate for you, but it is for me. It's kind of crazy how metabolically flexible I am. However, the interesting thing is that when you fast, you can get into autophagy where and mitophagy, where you're digesting the unhealthy cells and organelles within the cells of your body. and it's a very healthy process. And one of the things that we need to do in order to overcome the challenges of what we're seeing in today's day and age, which is a bioaccumulation of senescent cells, which create people to age a lot faster, and it drives inflammation in the body and all these other factors. So I think fasting is a really powerful tool to develop and trigger autophagy so that we get rid of those senescent cells, as well as the aged stem cells. They call them senescent stem cells and stem cell exhaustion. And the more kind of toxic stem cells there are in the body, the more the other stem cells can be affected by that. The more senescent cells are in the body, the more they tell the healthy cells to actually become old. And so we want to figure out mechanisms to be able to do that. And so taking senolytics, are senescent supplements, essentially, that get rid of senescent cells. They're not senescent supplements, they're supplements.
Yes, please don't take those.
Get rid of senescent cells. They're powerful in doing that. But again, fasting is one of those things that can help with that. And ultimately, what we found in the research is that people that have a lower caloric kind of intake but higher nutrient dense diet, where they're consuming healthier vegetables and fats and proteins, they typically will live a lot longer than people that are eating a lot of calories that are low nutrient dense foods. That's pretty obvious. But what fasting does is it actually takes away meals, right? So typically people over time, they'll eat less calories, but typically they're eating higher nutrient dense calories, because the people that intermittent fast are typically people that are more health conscious. They're typically people that are into living longer and a lot of the stuff that we're into.
Yeah, I love that. I love all the benefits that you just laid out there. So many reasons for people to take advantage of intermittent fasting. But one thing that isn't talked about quite enough, I think it's gaining more traction and more conversation these days, is just the fact that a lot of the research around fasting in general is done on men. And so I thought it was interesting how you were kind of talking about the ice cream, and you're like, I'm gonna be in ketosis by dinner time if I eat ice cream at lunch. I don't know about you. And it's true, it's just women hormonally are different from men. And I don't think that we've acknowledged that as much as it's getting talked about lately. But with that, there's some confusion that's occurred because women are wanting to take advantage of intermittent fasting and fasting in general because of all of those benefits that you just listed. But then how do we do that in a way that honors how we are created? So interesting kind of story I'll share is, you know me, I'm always researching, I'm looking for different things that I can learn about health, wellness, personal development, all of that. And so I picked up Dr. Mindy Pelz's book, Fast Like a Girl. It was wonderful. It had great tips in it for me. We have fasted for as long as I can remember, as not just for health and wellness, but as a spiritual discipline as well, helping to curb those cravings and really gain control over what I call the flesh side, what we acknowledge as the flesh side of our humanity. It's wonderful for helping to really curb that. So I read her book to figure out how to, fast better as a female. And there were great tips that I gleaned out of that. So cut to, it was literally like 2 or 3 weeks after I read that book. I'm kind of putzing around on YouTube. I go and watch Andrew Huberman's podcast. He has Dr. Stacey Sims on there. She's exercise scientist and former female athlete. And she's doing a lot of great work out there with the education that she's providing. So I'm listening to the podcast and I'm like, this is really interesting. And then she's like, absolutely no fasting for women ever. Like, it's horrible for women to fast. Don't do it. You're going to increase cortisol. You're going to store fat if you fast. And I'm just like, I seriously was just so annoyed in the moment because I'm like, here we have one expert over here, Dr. Mindy Pelz, writing an entire book about the benefits of fasting for women. Then you turn over here and see this other expert on Dr. Huberman's podcast who is saying the exact opposite. And so I was like, I'm just going to click into these comments because I wonder if these women are feeling as highly annoyed as I am. And the top comment was like, it was like 1,000 comments where people were like, this is why we hate the wellness industry. Like, they're so upset because It is. It's literally like mental ping pong at times where you feel like one expert is saying this, one is saying that. Now we can dive into the nuances of what Mindy Pelz is saying and what Dr. Stacey Sims is saying. Mindy Pelz is essentially...
we should go into that.
We can. We can touch on it.
Go into a little bit about what Mindy Pelz says and about this, fasting around your cycle and your follicular phase and your luteal phase. And then you'd love to just kind of give them an overview of both perspectives.
Yeah, so totally. High level Colt Notes is Dr. Mindy Pelz's perspective is that you want to be fasting with your cycle. If you're a woman who's still menstruating, you want to be fasting in the ebbs and flows of your cycle. So there's certain times of your cycle, typically at the beginning, days 1 through 14, where you want to be playing with the estrogen. So estrogen it rises in that time period. And so in that time period, it's better to fast because your body is more aligned with fasting in that time. It helps that hormone to rise. But then in the second half of your cycle, when you're looking for progesterone to rise and really take over the show, progesterone doesn't like an environment of fasting. So she recommends not doing it at that time.
And another thing that she says is like it's even better in the first part of your cycle up to day 12 or so to be going into ketosis and experimenting with low carb, but then the latter part, you may not want to be low carb.
Right.
You may not want to be consuming like straight ketogenic foods or whatever.
Totally. And for me personally, keto just does not align with my physiology. It may for other women, but for me, it just doesn't work. But so her information around how to time with your cycle was genius, because before I would just, pick a time to fast. Like, are we going to be on vacation? Don't pick those days. Like, I don't want to be fasting on vacation. I would just, we just kind of throw a dart on the calendar and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, why is this cycle feel so hard? Well, it's because you're fasting at a time that's not in alignment with your body.
Exactly.
So those are that's the main difference between Mindy Pelz's perspective, which is more so doing the intermittent fasting in alignment with your menstrual cycle, versus Stacey Sims, who is saying don't do it at all. Now, it really opens up a bigger conversation, because I think if we go high level, the question isn't even really, do I fast? Do I not intermittent fast? We're reaching a time in this space in history in the wellness industry where I really feel like people are just sick of hearing all this different advice. There used to be all the diet wars of no, it's paleo, no, it's keto, no, it's carnivore, no, go vegan. And it was, all this bickering. Yeah. I think people are so sick of that and the dogma around different habits and, you've got a cold plunge, you've got to do this. No, you do what works for you and your physiology. It's what you call explain the N of one philosophy, because I think that really illuminates it even more.
Yeah, and I'll do that, and then I want you to go back and just share what Stacey's perspective is, because I think it would be good to get into a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, they're both right in a way, because the reality is there are some women that when they fast, they do increase cortisol levels, and they do have challenges, and it may be that their hormones are completely out of whack. It may be that there's a bioaccumulation of environmental toxins. It may be that they're so deficient in micronutrients of glutathione and B12 that when they fast, they go even more depleted in those particular micronutrients, and then they're not producing dopamine or serotonin, and then they feel depressed and they feel out of whack, right? So this is what I'm talking about when I say N of one in a personalized approach to healthcare. The best way to do this, obviously, is lab testing. Work with somebody like myself or a longevity practitioner that would just help knock this out of the park for you. However, what I will say is that you have an innate intelligence within you that speaks, that communicates, that the medical system doesn't acknowledge, and they're not really telling you to, hey, what is your body saying? No, just take this pill, do this thing, because that's what Big Pharma is telling you to do. And it's unfortunate, but that is the reality in which we live. And so I can remember being dogmatic about a bunch of stuff when it came to your health. I remember saying, babe, you need to fast, you need to do this. we need to work out, and then I'd hurt you when we're working out because I'm pushing you too hard or whatever.
Right, literally getting injured.
Yeah, I'm like injuring you. And so what we've learned over time, though, from those early years of me being more of like a wellness Nazi in a way, like super dogmatic about different things. And I did go through my vegan, alkalarian phase, and I've gone through my carnivore phase, and I've gone through all of these different phases, but what it really comes down to is creating a customized approach.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you and I were just in Switzerland at Clinique La Prairie, and one of the things that was interesting to me is that we were just on the same diet, right? They gave us the same food, but your blood physiology is completely different than mine. Mm-hmm. And you actually needed to be on more of a high protein diet, something that had a little bit higher iron, things of that nature, probably get consuming like more meat or something along those lines. And by the way, this is like a cleansing retreat. Like this is a retreat where we went to this longevity resort to essentially cleanse and enjoy our 15th year wedding anniversary, which was fun. However, I needed to be on the exact opposite diet as you, right? And so there wasn't really any of that customization. And that's what we're talking about when it comes to fasting, right? You want to check in with yourself. How are you doing physiologically? Ideally, you want to get some lab tests done to see, if things are working, if they're not working. But the reality is, I believe that most women benefit from intermittent fasting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've seen this clinically with thousands of patients that we've worked with over the years in our longevity practice and regenerative medicine practice. We know that these people have gotten amazing results on pre and post lab tests. And they're not gaining weight like Stacey is saying. They're not storing all this fat. In fact, it's the opposite. They're getting six packs, or they're getting lean, right? So share a little bit about what Stacey said, and then also talk about how you've customized it to yourself and how you've created kind of the ideal program for you.
Well, I don't know all the nuances of what she went into, because honestly, as soon as she started going down the road of like, fasting is horrible, don't do it, I was like rolling my eyes, because I know that it's worked really well for me in the past. So her whole premise is just simply what you said, is that she feels that fasting puts the body in a state of stress and increases cortisol, and that causes women to store that extra fat, and that's why she doesn't recommend doing it. I do think that it's easier to do an intermittent fasting routine if you're eating healthy. And I think that may be a factor in why we've had such great results with clients in the past, is because they're not trying to do an intermittent fasting regimen with a bunch of processed food and fast food and stuff like that, because all of that input, because if we think about food as inputs into the body, it's giving the body information that the body is then using to, fire different chemical processes and biological processes. If the inputs going in are toxic processed foods, then already you're putting in interferences to the hormone cascades and all of the different things that happen in the body.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that can be a factor for people if they're trying to adopt a fasting regimen, having not made the shift to healthy lifestyle. They're trying to do it while still eating a more conventional diet. I think it can make that a lot harder. So for me, I don't intentionally intermittent fast every day. I think with our natural lifestyle, that's just what we do. I tend to not be super hungry until around 9 or 10 o'clock in the day. We tend to be eating dinner and finishing up with that around 6:30 at night. And then I'm not in the kitchen after that. I'm trying to get out of there and get people in the bed. So I think it's just a natural ebb and flow. And then with what I learned with Dr. Mindy Pelz's book is just when we are doing those more intense, committed spiritual fasts, we're wanting to go deeper with our fasting regimen, I do that in a way that works with my cycle. And so for you, if you're watching and asking questions about what's gonna work for me, you just got to try it on and see what works for you, but stay in tune with your body. And I think that's the best thing that people can do, is really listen to what's working for you, because that's going to give you the information that you're going to need to be successful.
Yeah, and if you want to experiment with it, I highly recommend it, because our ancestors did this. Our ancestors fasted. They would have to fast in different ways, right? And in the summer, they may be exposed to a lot of high carbohydrate foods, and they're eating honey and they're eating berries and fruits. And the winter, they're probably naturally going into ketosis, and they're eating more proteins and healthy fats. And they also may go from time to time without food, right? And so obviously it's not healthy to go weeks without food or several days without food, maybe unless you're just doing it for spiritual purposes. However, the reality is, try it on, as she said, and the rules are, consume healthy food, right? Healthy proteins, healthy fats, healthy carbohydrates. I would experiment with essentially a 16-8 a fasting schedule, where you're essentially eating for 8 hours, where it might be 10 o'clock in the morning, you finish at 6 o'clock. That's 8 hours. Yeah. So 16 hours fasting, 8 hours of an eating window. So that's 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Some people do 6 hours, where it's 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And other people like invert it. And that's something that you may want to experiment with if you're having difficulty sleeping, where you eat at 9 o'clock and then you finish your last meal at, say, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock at night, or in the afternoon. And that gives you time to fast before you go to bed, which allows for your digestion to happen. And then what you'll see is you'll be able to get into deeper sleep. Now, you have to get past the first few days of experimenting with that, because what ends up happening is you'll be hungry before going to bed. If you break past that the first couple of days, then it'll be completely fine, because your hormones will regulate and normalize.
Yeah, and I will say too, I was just thinking as you were asking about my experience with this, I could not do the intermittent fasting regimen when I was post having all the babies, and we have 4 children from ages 4 to 11. And I remember once I was out of the phase of nursing a baby and I was trying to regulate my hormones, yes, I had a lot of adrenal fatigue, just really dysregulated sleep from waking up all throughout the night. When I would try to fast and do the intermittent fasting regimen at that time, I just completely crashed. I would wake up exhausted, and I can't remember whose book I was reading. Oh my goodness, her name will come to me. She's Sarah Gottfried, that's the name. I have several of her books. She talks about women's hormones and just helps to give a better understanding of what works for women. And one of the things that I realized when I was reading through some of the books that I had was, for women who are dealing with adrenal dysregulation, if you are going into the night, into your sleeping hours in a fasted state, it can actually cause you to wake up in the middle of the night because of a glycemic crash. And I already deal with low blood sugar, if you will. At times I can tend to run like hypoglycemic. And so what I found was that I was waking up in the middle of the night when I was doing like a 10-6 fast. I would wake up around 3 a.m., 4 a.m., could not get back to sleep. And so one of the recommendations, I think it was her that she said this in one of her books, one of the recommendations was to eat some healthy fat, like a tablespoon of peanut butter or something, like right before bed, to help normalize your blood sugar before you go to sleep. And it helped me to stay asleep until the morning. So I just wanted to share that for women who may be in the years where your child, you're giving birth to babies and nursing, and if you're dealing with that dysregulated sleep at night, sometimes that push to fast does create more stress on the adrenals, and that needs to get worked out before you go into doing a fasted regimen.
That's great. Wow. So thank you so much for watching. Please click the like button, share this with people you think might find value out of this information. And we'd love for you to click the bell button so when you do subscribe, and when you subscribe, you can be notified right away when there's new videos out. So thank you again. And thank you so much for your amazing insight into creating an N of 1 approach, a customized, personalized approach, and listening to the innate healing power and wisdom of the body around fasting.
Awesome. We'll see you next time.